IVM.
Did you know that the first Indian bank to set up a mobile branches in India was the Bank of Baroda in 1964? With their expertise in all aspects of finance and banking, today, Bank of Baroda is truly one of the most reliable banks in the country. Today, you can open your savings account online at Bank of Baroda through just a video KYC. It's only a video call away. It's that simple and quick. Visit www.bankofbaroda.in for more information.
Hello folks, welcome to The Last Brand Standing presented by Bank of Baroda. It's a podcast where we discuss some of the most iconic brand rivalries from the Indian marketplace. In this episode, we take a deep dive into the Indian biscuit sector, talking about Britannia and ITC. Our competitors today, Britannia versus ITC. Both are really old companies and both are head-on competitors for biscuits. If you're wondering where's Parle is also somewhere there. But this episode today is about Britannia versus ITC because ITC essentially stepped into Britannia's turf. So, Ambi, what do we have here? What do we have in today's episode for our listeners? Tell us.
Yeah, this is a very tasty battle here. All of us love biscuits. And I think over the course of this episode, we will look at how, because of this Britannia versus ITC battle, we biscuit lovers have finally ended up with a whole variety of wonderful biscuits to eat every day. So, looking forward to this episode again, Anupam. Over to you.
You have any favorite biscuits, Ambi?
Well, mine is it's between Jim Jam and bourbon. And of course, Oreo. I mean, I have a story about Oreo, but this episode not about Oreo, but I love Oreo.
I love all those biscuits other than Threptin. Okay, other than Threptin, I like all biscuits.
Yeah, also Dark Fantasy. Fantasy Choco Fills.
No. I'm old school. I'm old school. I go back to pure magic. Okay, so give me the cream. Don't give me that filling thing. Anyway, sorry guys, we kind of just got into a moment there on biscuits. So let's start. Quick background on the Indian biscuit industry. More than a few $1 billion US dollars inside. It is really large, okay? And it's dominated by two players, Britannia and Parle. Between them, they control something like 70% of the market. Of course, there's also a very big unorganized market, but we don't have too much of idea about that. We're talking about the organized sector. There's Britannia, there's Parle, and then there's everybody else. Between them, they control some huge 60-70% of the market. And remember that India's biscuit market is now full of all kinds of tastes, okay? All the way from the humble and the very popular and the very important, especially in this epidemic, the Parle G biscuit, all the way to expensive cookies that Ambi just mentioned, those Dark Fantasy and all those kinds of stuff. Why would anybody have Choco Fills? Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is part one. We're going to talk about Britannia first. So let's start straight away with our first player. Britannia, formed all the way back in 1892. Britannia is the maker of much loved and liked biscuits like bourbon, or I've called it for as long as I can remember. Ambi, bourbon kya hota hai? Whiskey hota hai na bourbon. I remember it as Bon. It is Bon biscuit, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
There you go. Bon biscuit. So remember that before this entire craze of filled biscuits and all that, glucose was and still is a massive market. And back in 1997, Britannia entered the glucose brand. It was taking on Parle at that point of time. And if you remember the famous Gabbar Singh ad for the Britannia version of their glucose biscuit, right?
That was earlier. That was earlier,
okay.
Anupam. In fact, Britannia has been trying to fight the glucose battle, I think, for ages. Okay. And it was in 1976 or so, they made that famous Gabbar Singh ad.
What was the brand of
their act corrected. 97, they got their act corrected.
Okay.
By launching Tiger.
So back in the 70s, that whole Gabbar Singh ad, do you remember the brand of Britannia's glucose biscuit at that point of time? Was it still Tiger?
It was called Britannia Glucose D.
Oh, okay. Britannia
Glucose. It was such a mouthful that when I give my talks, I say that if they had launched Britannia Tiger with Gabbar Singh in 1976-77, the story would have been different. Glucose D was such a mouthful that it didn't do well. The brand didn't do well.
Yeah. So late 90s, 2000s, Britannia really got their act together. They went heavy on the marketing, on the sponsorship. They sponsored cricket bats, organized a Lagan match. Imagine that. They zeroed in on Sachin Tendulkar to endorse its entire product range. So the early 2000s, Britannia and Parle between them held 82% in value terms. The rest was also firmly held by smaller players like Priya Gold, which had a strong presence in the north. Ambi, now over to you. Walk us through this entire Britannia success story and tell us more about the whole thing that you said about the glucose biscuit, right? Because that whole glucose biscuit was really all there was the biscuit market a long time ago. Over to you. Go on.
Yeah, okay. So let's pull back. Britannia is a very, very old company. It is one of those so-called British companies headquartered in Kolkata. Very stable way of working, and I suppose I'm sure you must have passed their head office in Kolkata, where probably they had liveried waiters, delivering coffee and tea to their senior executives. And I think for many years it was a nice sleepy company based in Kolkata, and there was this Indian company based in Parle, which is Parle, and they had the market to themselves. And the market was growing, but it was probably there were hundreds of small players all over India. And the market was largely, Parle had what is a brand they called Parle Gluco, and Britannia had a brand called Britannia Glucose, and then Britannia had another brand called Mari, and they had another brand which sold primarily in Tamil Nadu, which was Milk Bikis, and a brand which sold in Kolkata, which you may remember, called Arrowroot Biscuit.
Of course, with the sugar cubes on the top, right?
It's a very interesting. It was like Mari, but it had an a little bit of arrowroot in it, and it was very popular in East India. Parle Gluco actually had so many lookalike brands around the country that they figured out that they need to fix this. And I don't know, they took a bold decision to change the brand name from Parle Gluco to Parle G. And that was a master stroke, because in one way, they could then stop the imitation business from happening. A brilliant move by Parle happened, I think, probably in the 80s or early 90s. Britannia then moved to Kolkata, from Kolkata to Bangalore, and they started imbibing the Bangalore spirit. And I suppose they moved somewhere around early 80s or mid 80s, and they unleashed a whole new energy in the company. Of course, they had bourbon, which you called Bon Bon, which was a relatively small brand, but they started investing in it. They had a brand called Nice Time. And I think the big break, and of course, they had something called Jim Jam, which was I love that biscuit. Yeah, which has
Come on, yeah. Who doesn't love Jim Jam? Come on.
Love Jim Jam is really nice. And they had 50-50. And I think 87 was a breakthrough moment for them when they launched Good Day. Good Day redefined the Indian biscuit market. They created the whole category called cookies, which are more tasty, had a more butter kind of a feel. It was a runaway success. It was an amazingly successful brand, and that gave Britannia tremendous amount of tailwind to keep innovating and keep launching new products. And around that time, they also underwent a identity change, and they hired Shomit Sengupta in Bangalore to do their identity. And they came out with this fabulous campaign about eat healthy, think better. Now, they linked food to thinking. That was, I think, a great breakthrough. But that line is not as good, Anupam. What is wonderful is when you take a English line and make actually the Hindi line even better. And this is an example of that. Eat healthy, think better sounds very clunky. But in Hindi, it became magical. Do you remember the line?
No, I don't. What is it? I remember the 87 World Cup.
Yeah. Eat healthy, think better.
Swasth khao, acha socho.
Swasth khao, tan man jagao.
Almost like a Nirma thing. Swasth khao, tan man jagao. Good Lord, that sounds really good. It was an amazing
campaign. Swasth khao, tan man jagao was when, I was in advertising then, right? And you saw that campaign and said, wow, this is great. You took eat healthy, think better into Swasth khao. Swasth, that again is a Sanskritized, is not a pure Hindi word. Swasth khao, tan man jagao. And then they took it to another level. They had this fabulous campaign which they ran. And the other interesting thing about Britannia, and I should admire them, is that right from the 70s onward, they were working with one agency as their agency partner. It was then Lintas. Now it's, of course, Lowe. And then Lintas Calcutta used to handle the business, and then moved to Lintas Bangalore, and Lintas set up a very large Bangalore office to handle that. And they partnered with Britannia over many. Now, of course, McCann does some amount of advertising for them, but it was a great example of a client and agency partnership. So Swasth Ka Tanman Jagao 1997 was a breakthrough campaign. Suddenly you started seeing Britannia in a new light. If Parle was a common man's biscuit, Britannia became the upper middle class, the so-called classy people's biscuit, because it was not just food, man. It was about tan man jagana, which was, the whole taking it to another level. And around that time, 1997, was when they also hit upon the fact that they need to crack the base of the pyramid, which is glucose, and they launched Tiger Biscuit. And I remember, I think they used Sachin Tendulkar in their Tiger Biscuit campaign, which was very, very successful. And that was, I would call, phase 2 of Britannia, which was very well done. And then came phase 3, where they, I think the thinking, this was done during Vinita Bali's time. The entire Swasth Ka Tanman Jagao was when Sunil Alag was the CEO. And then Vinita Bali came and she took on some of the new challenges, and her own passion is about nutrition. And they launched a whole new range of products under the Nutri Choice brand name. So they went from simple, ordinary glucose, Marie, milk bikis to simple, cream biscuit. They took it on to more nutritious product like Nutri Choice, whole variety of them, and they also revamped their cream biscuits with the pure magic. So Britannia, between the year, I would say probably between the 90s and the 2000, 2000, was really powering ahead with a lot of exciting new products, exciting innovations, and they were in a very, very strong position. So if Parle was the market leader in terms of volume, Britannia in terms of value was almost near Parle, and probably in terms of profitability, it was much higher, because Parle, large part of Parle sales comes from Parle G, and Parle G is and whatever little study I've done of Parle almost sees itself as a Gandhian company. They don't make, they make very modest amount of profit. And in fact, I remember once we did a study for 10 years, Anupam, Parle G price was not increased. It was 5 rupees.
That's legendary. They are known for that.
So it's an amazing company which understands cost and kept the cost low. So
like the Amul
Parle
of
probably
biscuits,
tonnage.
I said that they were like the Amul of biscuits. Although obviously they're a private company and that's a cooperative federation. So ownership-wise, no, but product-wise, I think I get what you say. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think Britannia managed to actually define a space for themselves, which was the premium space, the more luxurious products, the more interesting products, the Swasth Ka, Tanman Jagao kind of very, very interesting products. And things were going on very, very nicely. And one should not forget that a lot of companies did try playing a game in the biscuit market. Cadbury launched Bonvita biscuit, which failed. Even HUL, when they bought Modern, they tried launching a Modern biscuit, which failed. GSK tried Horlicks biscuit, which didn't do too well. Heinz tried Complan biscuit, didn't do too well. So things were kind of very well said. There were two big boys, and there were a lot of local players. And that's when the story changed. Over to you, Anupam, to take us to the next module.
Yeah, you kind of almost answered my question in that last part of me, because I was going to ask you that right now, that why, in the sense that biscuits is as FMCG a category as it can get. I was going to ask you, but you answered it. What I was going to ask you was, why hasn't Levers tried it? Why hasn't Nestle tried it? And you just answered. What's your view on biscuits here, Ambi? I want to just wrap up this first part on this, because I think that, so this is all about tastes. और जब कुछ जमता है तो जमता है और नहीं जमता है तो नहीं जमता है. So I'm just trying to understand, how does one crack the biscuits market here?
It's so when we talk about ITC, we will learn a few lessons from ITC on what they tried doing in their first 5 years and how they turned around. But
these guys, the entire marketing and understanding and muscle power of a Levers or even of a Nestle, they couldn't crack biscuits at that point of time. And of course, I think they just probably gave up on that.
They gave. I also believe, and in the third section we'll talk about it. What does it take to break into a market like this? Probably they gave up too early, and you had to actually find a guy with that stomach to take that risk
to
come in and change the rules of the game.
Yeah, because man, Indian FMCG is a tough place. So, folks, that is a wrap on the first part of this episode. We spoke about Britannia. In the next part, we're going to talk about ITC, the competitor who took on Britannia and actually did really well. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market, and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Dugirala. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from.
And welcome back. In the first part, we spoke about Britannia. Now we are going to talk about ITC. Now, ITC on its own honestly deserves an entire episode, if not an entire series, for its history, for its size, for the different things it has done, for all the controversies, for all the other things that have surrounded it. Now, ITC was formed as Imperial Tobacco back in 1910, and it changed its company to India Tobacco Company in 1970 as the company's ownership progressively Indianized. Okay, so ITC. Over the years, ITC just expanded its portfolio right, left, and center. Now, the main engine, the core business of ITC, where it gets its profits, where it gets its cash flows, is cigarettes. Okay, so it developed its category from just that one product all the way to today, where it has 20 categories and probably more than thousands of products. So today, ITC, I think, broadly has a meaningful presence in, I would say, sectors probably agriculture, services, and manufacturing. Now, why did ITC enter the biscuit segment? Ambi will get onto that. But if I look at an really old interview that their then, chief executive Ravi Naware had given, I think this was on a Rediff article, and he was the chief executive of ITC Foods. This is what he said. And I think this interview was back in 2003 or 2006 or somewhere. He said, we decided to enter the food segment because it's a 550,000 crore market in India, but only 6% of this is branded and packaged. 6% branded and packaged. Okay. In developed markets, nearly 95% of the food market is branded and packaged. So obviously, there's a lot of scope for branded players. Remember the first part, we spoke about how biscuits is an unorganized, unbranded market where regional players who have a brand but are not that well known, they are dominant. Now, ITC was already doing this entire value addition game in wheat, which was atta present. By entering biscuits, thought it could improve its bottom line further. So in 2005, ITC signed up film stars like Shah Rukh Khan, Southern Star Surya as brand ambassadors. See, now for biscuits, and Ambi will also say this, will add on to this, distribution and visibility are really important. And thanks to ITC's existing tobacco business, the company already had a good understanding of distribution channels where it could launch its Sunfeast products. Now, according to Nielsen Corporation, ITC was able to add more than 1 million retail outlets to its FMCG network. ITC is like the muscular heavyweight. Now, jidhar jata hai, it either goes for something or just shuts it off. It's crazy. So, over to you. Tell us the ITC story now.
Okay, so I can, thanks to my many years in Ulka and FCD Ulka, I can go, like you said, we can do a full episode on ITC. But here I will restrict myself to what is the gene pool of ITC which made it look at biscuits and food and what made it succeed. So if you go back to look at ITC's history, Anupam, ITC is a company which actually is very nicely backward integrated. They make cigarettes. They actually have a leaf tobacco division which pioneered the growth of high-value tobacco in this country. They have their own packaging company. They have their own paperboard company. So in a sense, it's beautifully backward integrated. And they understand, unlike most other companies, they understand how to work with agriculture, how to work with Indian farmers. So when they got into the food business in 2002, that was not the first time they were trying it. They had tried it literally in 1989 with the launch of their cooking oil brand, Sundrop. Again, Sundrop was planned as a backward integrated. You start getting into seeds, improve the growth of high-yielding oil seeds in this country. And from there, you get the seeds, crush the seeds, package it and sell it. But of course, things changed and they actually sold the plant and sold the brand and sold everything and they got out of it. And then later when Mr. Yogi Deveshwar took over as CEO, I think the board said, look, we need to relook at this because we understand retail, we understand consumers, how consumers go about buying, we understand the retail trade, we understand manufacturing, we understand how to help farmers grow better, we know how to buy agricultural raw materials. So it was like a fabulous playbook they had ready, and they applied it in 2002. They launched Ashirwad Atta. At that time, I remember there was Annapurna, and then there was Captain Cook, and there was a couple of other brands from Delhi. They launched Ashirwad, and then in 2003, they launched their biscuit brand, which was Sunfeast. Of course, you should remember that Sunfeast may also remind you of the cooking oil brand ITC had in 1989, which was Sundrop. And Sunfeast again started, they said we cannot go about building multiple brands, so we'll have one brand which will be Sunfeast. It will take on Britannia, it will take on Parle. And I think the early phase of Sunfeast was trying to get a basic product and market going. And there again, they addressed the bottom. So they had a Sunfeast Mari Light, they had a Sunfeast Milky Magic, and they had a Sunfeast Glucose. They had SRK, Shah Rukh Khan for rest of India, and they had Surya, who's a big film star in Tamil Nadu, to promote their brand in Tamil Nadu, especially Milky Magic. And ITC is very strong in South India. So they got fairly good traction going forward. But as they start building their business, they realized that their cream biscuit were taking off. And so their cream biscuit started moving very well, and they started promoting it more and more. And the phase 2 ITC came almost 5-7 years after they had, Ravi Navare that then moved out, and then Chittaranjan Dar had come in, and he started looking at the cost. He started saying we need to look at profitable segments, and their board was also pushing them towards improving profitability, and they realized that they should go up to the top end of the market. And so they focused on cookies. They launched a whole range of, now they have a brand called Mom's Magic. They had a whole range of cookies they launched, and then they launched Dark Fantasy. Dark Fantasy was an amazing success. It was a cream biscuit, chocolate, and a cream in the middle. They had multiple flavors in that. And then they launched a brand called Dark Fantasy Cream Fills, which is a biscuit with cream in the middle. It kind of almost like a chocolate, and fabulous tasting product. And this gave them a huge win. So to succeed in the Indian biscuit market, you need to have some semblance of presence in the bottom end, which is Bari, Glucose, some simple salt biscuit, and some simple milk biscuit. But then you need to start adding layers on top. And ITC did it very well. They had cookies. Cookie was taking off. 2005, 2010, cookie started expanding, and cookie literally became the new glucose biscuit in India. And ITC was very good. ITC was very good at innovating, creating new flavors, creating new varieties. And yeah, like you said, they had a long-term vision to build the business. They're willing to invest. They're willing to invest in one particular year. I remember we were sitting and doing an analysis, and we discovered that FCB Ulka, which handled the ITC biscuit business, one particular year we discovered we had actually made 24 different ads for them.
Wow.
And so they were really aggressive. Hemant Malik was then the marketing head. Now he's currently the CEO of the biscuit business. They were very aggressive. They kept going with new products into the market. And if something fails, take it off. Come on, get on with new product. Get on. So today, even when they launched their Bingo Chips was not a success, but then they kept at it, and they managed to fix so they actually today straddle the whole spectrum. They have Atta, and then they have biscuit, and they have
noodles.
Yeah, they've now got Yippee noodles. They've got into, that's another story, whether they should get into milk and juice and all that. But here, at least as far as biscuits are concerned, finally, Britannia had a credible competition. And Britannia, I don't think, could react fast enough to ITC. And of course, if you have a very, very strong competitor, maybe Britannia did the right thing, saying, look, let's stay back and protect our turf and let the growth go to that guy. So as you said, at one time, Parle and Britannia had 80% of the organized sector market. Thanks to ITC, That came down to 70%. My feeling is ITC may have taken more market share out of Britannia than from Parle, because Parle was really about the bottom end, which is, Parle G. Large part of their business comes from Parle G, which is unshakable because it is so economically priced. We'll talk about in the third part how it's a great example of value engineering, right? But, this is interesting. ITC succeeded where other big food companies did not succeed, right? Hindustan Unilever had a huge food business. They had Nor soups, they had tea, they had coffee, but they couldn't make a success out of cookies and biscuits. Now I don't know whether with Horlicks they will be able to succeed. Again, GSK, they had Horlicks, they had Boost, they didn't succeed. Cadbury, they had tried with Bonvita, didn't succeed. In fact, Cadbury actually succeeded with Oreo by going after the top end of the market. And who created the entire top end? It was created largely by Britannia and then further built by ITC, right?
Correct.
And tried with Complan, didn't succeed, right? Nestle is now trying with a brand called Excelsior. But why did all of them fail? And how did ITC succeed? I think it's a combination of will, combination of tremendous understanding of the whole supply chain, understanding of retail, how they could control retail, how they could invest in retail, and of course, how they went about building their brand. They continued to invest in their Sunfeast brand. They innovated the hell out of the category. And I think all this combined to make ITC into a credible player. Now, I think ITC probably has a 10% market of the overall biscuit category and probably 25 to 30% of the premium category, which is cookies and cream biscuits. So ITC is succeeded where a lot of other companies have just given up and run away. So
they didn't get it all right. Yeah, they didn't get it all right at start, right, Ambi? I mean, you can't just... you say that the early focus on Marie and glucose and milk, it really didn't pan out for them back then when they started off. That early...
Yeah, I think, that's my view, but, others may disagree. But my view was that the early attempt at trying to innovate, they created an orange Marie, which didn't succeed. They had a Me Too product called Milky Magic to take on milk bickies that had modest success. Their glucose was always and that bottom end is difficult to compete. Difficult to compete because the margins are low and the consumer will move whenever he gets 5 paise, 10 paise off this way, that way. But I think after 4, 5, 6 years, they realized that they changed the game. And they could change the game because they already had some presence. That's a problem, right? If you don't have, the retailer will need all the products. And so they had a full portfolio, but they started focusing more and more, investing more and more on the top end. And that paid off.
Fantastic.
And that was a smart strategy.
Yeah, we're going to get into more of strategy, more of lessons on the last part of this, on the final part of this episode, Britannia versus ITC. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, Priya Mirza, host of our new podcast, The Longest Constitution, talks to Cyrus about her show and her podcasting experience. The importance of investing in a good night's sleep is highlighted by founder and CEO of Sleepy Cat, Kabir Siddique, on Advertising is Dead with Varun. On The Wire Talks, Siddharth talks about the horrendous capture of Kabul by the Taliban with the author and journalist Taran Khan. Co-founders of the Goa Rainbow Trust, Francis and Chris Fernandez, joined Farhad and Sunetra on GBCD. Witness the epic battles between detergent brands HUL and Nirma, as narrated by Anupam and Ambi on The Last Brand Standing. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you enjoyed this show or any of our shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to spread the word about a podcast. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Fiat Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and Intuit India. We really do appreciate the support. You are what makes this possible.
And welcome back to this episode. We spoke about Britannia in the first part, ITC in the second part, and in this third part, we are going to talk about lessons, about strategy, about a whole lot of stuff. So, Ambi, there's one thing that you notice about FMCG, probably holds true for a lot of other sectors also in India, which are consumer facing, right? So, India is a massive landscape with lots of opportunities. I remember, I think it was Rama Bijapurkar who had said that India keeps changing every 5 kilometers. So if you look at it from Kashmir to Kanyakumari or from Rajasthan to Assam, it just keeps on changing. So what is an opportunity is also a challenge for you to get right at a national level, whether it is in taste, whether it is in distribution networks, whether it is in anything. And this is specific to FMCG, right? Because say you can make a car, and a car will run just as it does in South as it will in the North. Essentially 4 wheels and all that. But a biscuit, a noodle, and everything else is different from FMCG company. And the pattern that I've seen is that the regional players, it reminds me of Nirma, the regional players capture this massive, regional market, which can be very big because some of India's states have population the size of European countries. Okay, so they kind of capture that market and then they establish themselves out there till a Levers, a Nestle, an ITC, the really big brand, kind of wrestles in, builds up distribution, builds up marketing, and takes over that market. So you've got this shift from unorganized to organized. We've seen that play out a lot. Tell me what's your take on this pattern at a generic level for FMCG as a whole, and how do these guys compete? The Britannias, the ITCs, the Levers, the Nestle. So let's start from there, because it is specific to biscuits. Biscuits has this whole unorganized market that shifted to organized. So let's get your view there.
The comment that India changes every 5 kilometers, which Rama made, is very apt. And that is all the more applicable. If you look at FMCG is a whole mass of products, right? There is soaps, shampoos, toothpaste, detergents, floor clean, skin creams. Everything goes into FMCG. But among all the FMCG, the most variable FMCG are foods. So food habits literally change from district to district in India. And which is why it's very difficult to take the same food product and popularize it across the country. So in some of the talks I give examples of 2 brands which have managed to do that. One, of course, is Parle-G. Parle-G, and to be successful across the country with literally the same product, you got to offer great price. You got to offer acceptable taste and quality. You got to offer tremendous availability. So it's available at every little nook and corner. And the 4th big problem with food product is expiry date. So therefore, you need to make sure that the product doesn't become stale in the retailer's outlets. You're able to incentivize the retailer, and you need to, at least through television, you need to build a brand so that the consumer will tell the retailer, ye mat dena, wo advertising deka, wo wala do, So Parle-G did it brilliantly, okay? And they built the world's biggest biscuit brand, right? Parle-G. And that they did it by hitting all the right buttons. They don't make it in one plant. They make it in 40 different plants around the country. And some years later, it was Nestle who got the formula right for Maggi, right? And though Maggi never made profits for 10 years, but I'm told now it's a very profitable brand. But Maggi succeeded by hitting all the right buttons. So biscuits were not true to India. Biscuits are completely alien taste. It's a British taste. We are used to eating kakras and all those kind of things. We're not used to eating biscuits, which is baked in an oven. Similarly, we're not used to eating noodles. So if you hit all the right buttons, taste, positioning, availability, and communication, you can create a market. And that's the example we see from the biscuit category. Though, what data which I was reading, biscuit is one of the few categories in India which has had huge penetration. Apparently, if you go across India, there are 300 million homes, 90% of them consume biscuits sometime or the other. Now, I don't think any other product category, except probably soap and detergent, which is washing powder, except those 2 or 3 categories, I don't think other categories will have this kind of penetration. But the problem is we are still low per capita. We are only probably 2 kg per capita, which is still very low. And I believe for a country like India, we should have 100 more Parle-Gs, 100 more, and Maggies, because that's a great way of converting the food which is being wasted into processed food, which can then get consumed in an economical fashion. The other big challenge with food, which you said very rightly, is that, you need to understand geography. You need to say north, south, east, west. You need to, for example, milk biscuits sell largely in Tamil Nadu and West Bengal. They don't sell in other parts of the country. Mari sells elsewhere. Glucose doesn't sell in some markets, right? So there are, still great opportunities for the biscuit marketers to look at interesting Indian flavors. And I believe that, things like masala, spicy Indian taste, mango, etc., have still not been tried out. And there are probably going to be great opportunities there. I think going forward, we have, Parle, Britannia, ITC, three big players. Probably there is scope for one more big player who can play nationally, who will be in the credible 10-12% league. And then I think the country will be probably 3 or 4 regional players in each market. Already, people like Priya Gold and all are pretty big in some markets. And there will be again local players. Every district will have 2 or 3 brands.
Okay.
So the market, I think we will continue to see excitement. Oreo in recent times, and I think Nestle is wanting to make plans, and I'm sure HUL will want to take Horlicks into the biscuit category. Complan has been bought by Zydus, so Complan may also come back into the biscuit category. So I think it's going to be modern trade. What is going to change is probably modern trade is going to change some of these things. I think online, e-commerce will change some of these things. We're going to see premium products coming into modern trade, premium products coming into e-commerce merchants. So the biscuit market in India is, I'm told, during the COVID lockdown, biscuit market has just exploded.
Parle-ji was the most sought after item. It was out of stock everywhere.
And apparently, during April, May, June quarter, Britannia registered 25% growth.
Yeah. Those results are out in the public domain. Yeah,
15 days they were shut, right? Yeah. But in spite of that, they got, so that's the kind of, so hopefully if Indian consumers have got used to buying packaged biscuits more and more, I think the biscuit market will continue to grow. So I'm looking forward. And the other interesting thing which has happened, now one more point, Anupam, because I hand back to you. If you go back to the 1985s and the 95, the Indian biscuit market was a pyramid, right? There was a huge bottom, which was, Parle, Glucose, Marie bottom, and then there was a small narrow top. But I think slowly over the last 10 years, thanks to ITC, thanks to Britannia, the market is becoming a bit of a diamond, where the bottom is still big, but there is a nice middle part emerging. That middle segment is where you have economical cookies, economical creams are playing. And then, of course, there is a top part where Nutri-Choice, Pure Magic, and ITC's Dark Fantasy, Choco Fills, Oreo, all of them are playing in the top end. So the market in the last 15 years has dramatically changed.
Okay, Ambi, so 2 things. I'll start on this diamond shape that you just spoke about. Do you think this is because the fight of 2 biggies gives lessons to the smallies, so to say? So that you have this, because consumer brands, when one goes against the other, I feel that the industry benefits. Okay, it's not always that one guy loses, one guy wins, although in some cases that has been the case. But when you look at it, a giant between 2 behemoths or between 2 elephants also creates some opportunities in business for the smaller players or for niche products or for new products. So what's your view on that? Do you think that the ITC Britannia fight, did it create opportunities for other brands to also jump in and say, chalo boss, hum bhi isme lag jate hain?
I think, when you have these intense, business battles between large players, a lot of excitement is created. One consumer who might have been in a kind of a boredom of buying bourbon every month suddenly sees, Pure Magic, sees Dark Fantasy, says, hey, let's try that. So the consumer's getting upgraded. Consumers, they're now ready to open the wallet and pay more. And that happens and that creates more space, and you find more people coming in. More people come in from 2 fronts. One, local manufacturers start offering more interesting products, right? And also more people to come from outside. And there is this cookie brand which has done reasonably well, right? Which came from Australia, I think. And then, of course, there is this so-called bespoke or artisanal cookie brands which are coming up. And those of us who used to travel regularly used to see that brand called Cookie Man, right? Selling, their cookies in airport, right? So suddenly, biscuit and cookie, which was seen as a very boring product, suddenly becomes very exciting. And like you said, this whole 2 giants fighting creates so much thunder and lightning that a lot of little rabbits and deer and all that can run in and eat, right? So 4 things happen, right? One, consumers are now being educated. You can get more and more variety. So they start demanding that. The retailer says, hey, I should also stock this. And he starts stocking new types of products. And when he starts stocking new types of products, other manufacturers say, I think we can also sell. So imported stuff comes, international companies come to set up plants in India, and everyone benefits, I think. And of course, finally, the farmer benefit, because all this stuff is bought from farmers, like wheat and atta and sugar and maida, oil. All that is bought from Indian farmers. And only thing which we don't talk about it here, but there is an 18% GST on cookies and biscuits, right? Which is for a product which is so commonly consumed. That's a little high, but I'm told, and you may know more, that's because of this inverse duty logic, because there's a lot of inputs.
Yeah, raw materials have higher GST than the finished product.
Yeah. So that's the logic I was given, but that 18% GST is probably given some wind to the local players, person who's operating at a district level, a state level to go. But I know I've advised small companies. It's tough. It is tough to compete with these big boys.
Okay, Ambi, last question. If there is a listener out there who's listening to us, he wakes up one fine day and says, "Mere ko bhi biscuit banane ka hai. Why don't I just, and maybe he doesn't have the hundreds of millions of dollars of a venture capital or a private equity to say, Leo, ja Simran, ja jile apni zindagi, okay? That, that you can go and spend through this and no need to make profits and revenue bhi nahi kamana. I'm ranting on that, but sorry. Yeah. In general, there's this, person who just says that I want to make biscuits. Why not? And why not? Actually, there are so many consumer brands that have come up in this lockdown. I have done a few episodes of my Paisa podcast that I've spoken to people in the startup industry, and they're saying direct to consumer is a hot business. Money is actually flowing in out there. So let's say someone wants to start his or her own biscuit brand. What would be your advice? What would be the top 3 or the top 5 things that this person should do? All the way from probably ideation to strategy to distribution, whatever.
I don't have great wisdom here, because I'm saying there are basic stuff you can do, which is that you have to first understand which market are you catering to, which is, you for example, you're sitting in, say, Nagpur. You have to say, look, I will define my market as Nagpur. I will not try and, and what happens in a lot of these small manufacturers, what has been advising, they start selling in Nagpur and they get calls from Pune and Bombay, and someone says, mujhe bhi 2 peti bhej do. And they supply it, and that's when the spiral starts, because you got to understand this is a perishable product. So once we did a study and we found that, for example, wafer chip manufacturers don't supply their product to any distributor is more than 200 kilometers from their factory gate, because you can't, it will go rancid. So first, understand your market. Don't go all over. Stay focused. Second, do something interesting with your product. Cookies, you can innovate. You can make jeera cookies. You can make ajwain cookies. You can talk of, immunity boosting cookies. You can put all kinds of stuff in cookies. It's very easy. There's a company who's advising out of Vijayawada, doing some fabulously innovative stuff with cookies. Then be ready to work very hard. Be ready to work the market. Be ready to wear your bloody shoe thin. You got to, if you want to go after the retail market, you got to work the market hard. You got to work very hard. And if you do that, in a year, you may become the top 5 brands in Nagpur. Then you can slowly get into Akola, Amravati, and you can slowly expand. But till you have got your formula right, and you're a small manufacturer, you can innovate. You can drop a product. You can say, jeera jada nahi dalenge. We'll put pepper dal ke karenge. We'll do something else. There are so many things you can do with, if you have your own little oven and a plant to make cookies. And today, compared to good old days, today packaging is available. Right? Good old days, only the big companies could make those kind of fancy packaging. Today, fancy packaging anyone can make. And of course, I've not talked, but if you think you're making a premium cookie of really exotic artisanal cookie, then you need to look at e-commerce. And you may say, I'll only sell it on e-commerce. I'll sell it from my factory gate to your home. I'll make sure the cookie you get in your house will be less than 7 days old or less than 5 days old. And if there's a business model, you can prove it. I'm sure some VC will come and give you a few $1 million, right? There are so many exciting things happening in the food space. Like you said, Anupam, a lot of new companies can come.
Yeah. And on that tasty note, we are actually late to catch a flight. Next time on The Last Brand Standing presented by Bank of Baroda, we'll see you from the skies talking about Jet Airways and Indigo. Bye-bye, folks. See you soon. And if you like this podcast, you can check out other interesting podcasts on the IBM network. Also, you can follow me, Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter.
And me, Ambi Parmeshwaran on Twitter at AmbiMGP.
Folks, that's all for today. See you guys next week.
If you're a cricket fan, check out Edges and Sledges, India's favorite cricket podcast.
The podcast focuses on Indian cricket, the IPL, and has a ton of banter both on and off the field.
We talk about the week's biggest cricket stories with current and ex-international cricketers, coaches, or sometimes just between us.
And it's hosted by me, DJ.
Me, Varun.
And me, Ashwin.
New episodes release every week.
You can catch us on the IVM Podcast's website, app,
or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood.
Get accustomed to womanhood.
Enjoy the experience of sisterhood.
Might get to wifehood.
Or not. Choose motherhood.
Or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
Earn a livelihood.
Change the neighborhood.
And get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha.
And me, Ayushi.
On a journey from station starting point.
To station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station. And hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.